How's it going, everybody? My name's Dave Whipple and you're watching Bush Radical. In this episode of this Alaska Cabin Project video series, I'm going to show you guys how to build a set of kitchen cabinets. I'm also going to show you guys how to take a countertop and prep it for a sink. And then ultimately we're going to install a sink bowl. Now this is cabin style construction, so maybe you guys are going to see something that you haven't seen before and a different way to go about this project. Stay tuned. This video is all about putting together the kitchen counters in this cabin. You can see Brooke is staining up the logs on the front of the house, and they sure are looking nice. Right here to the right, there's a couple key logs that need to be fit in, and that would fill up that wall. Right now what I'm doing is I'm measuring the area that the countertop is going to occupy in the kitchen cabinets. Looks like about 7 feet is all we're going to get. I got to measure the window too, because I want the sink square in the center of the window, not off to one side. Take and transfer my measurements to the face of this countertop. And then we'll take it outside and we'll start building not only the countertop partitions that actually hold the whole counter together and make the cabinet structure, but we'll also cut that countertop. Now we want the countertop to be the same as the top of the stove. The top of the stove is 36 inches. But the countertop itself is about an inch, 3/4 of an inch. So we're going to cut out our side partitions, our dividers that hold the countertop up at 35. That way that extra 3/4 of an inch, that'll give us about 36 inches to the top of the cabinets when we're done, to the actual countertop itself. Now how wide do we make them? That is front to back. Well, it's about 24 inches from this lip to the back. But we're going to use a 3/4 inch softwood face on this. So we're going to want to go probably about 23 inches from the front to the back when we make these dividers. That way it'll give us enough room to put 1 inch of softwood on the front to get our 24 inches. I like to do all these marks in just pencil and use a straight edge to make the mark as opposed to a chalk line. Chalk lines are a little fuzzy for me. So ultimately I'm going to make these panels 35 inches high by 23 inches wide. These will divide the counters. They'll be structural. They'll hold up the countertop itself. They're pretty much the blood and guts of a kitchen cabinet system underneath the countertop. If you go to the store you get these in particle board, but I like making mine out of plywood. Right now what I'm doing is cutting along that 35 inch mark. Now this piece that comes off the top, I'm going to use that for the kickboard area underneath the counters. You know, every counter's got that little area where your toes can go up underneath of it. That's what that piece is going to be used for. Now I'm cutting off the first of my cabinet partitions. This is 23 inches by 35. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut the other end off too. Once I get that done, I'll cut the 2 cuts out of the middle. Because these panels are 23 inches wide, they don't come right to the center. So I'll end up with about 3.5, 4 inches in the center left that needs to be cut. There's the first cut. There's the second cut. That's going to leave me just a little bit of scrap. I really don't need that scrap. But that 1 foot rip that I cut off the whole entire length, that's going to be that little indent where you put your feet up underneath the counter when you're making waffles or whatever you're doing. So I'm setting the table saw up for 1 cut at 4 inches, and then I'll readjust and make the other cut at 3 1/4. This is 3/4 inch plywood, so basically what I'll end up with is I'll end up with a 90-degree angle when I nail the 2 together. That's 4 inches both directions. You know, it really makes me wonder what that's called. It's the place you put your toes underneath the counter. You know, there's always a little space. I'm sure it has a name, but I have no idea what it is. So I think right in this picture I'm making the 4 inch cut. I already made the 3 1/4 inch cut. Now I'm going to put the 2 together. I'm going to make sure that they're flush on one end. And then I'm going to mark them at 7 foot. And that's going to be the full length of our kitchen counter area. Now these are actually going to be structural. They're going to actually hold the dividers of the kitchen countertop cabinets apart. You'll see. Now what I'm doing is I'm just going to lay a bead of glue along one side of one of these boards, put the other one against it, and nail them together like a half a box type of thing. Once I'm done, I'll have a 90-degree wooden area that is 4 inches and by 4 inches. Now once I get all this nailed off, I'm just going to set this aside and let it dry. Then I'll take these partition pieces and I'm going to make a 4-inch by 4-inch square cut out of each corner. Now that 90-degree toe hold area is going to fit right into here. Couple nails, a little bit of glue. It's not only going to be structural, but it's going to be very functional, because a set of countertops without a place to put your toes, I'll build one time. I actually did, and it was awful. You find that you need to put your toes up underneath those kitchen cabinets. Without being able to get up underneath there, you kind of feel like you're too far away. Trust me on this one. So now it's time to bring out the countertop. I need to cut a hole in the countertop just the right size for that sink bowl. Now, you can't cut the hole the same exact size as the sink. You've got to cut it the size of the little channels that generally are used to bolt the sink down to the countertop. We're going to do it a little different way, but the first things first, I've got to cut about 1 foot off the end of this countertop, because this is an 8-foot counter. It needs to be 7 foot to fit the space we have. So we'll make a mark, we'll make this cut, and then we're going to cut out the sink bowl area. Now when you make this cut, you're cutting through the backsplash, along the face, and you get to the front, you got to make that little hop to get up over the lip of the counter. Now this is the sink we're going to use. I got this beauty at the Fairbanks dump. And the thing about sinks is they pretty much never go bad. A stainless steel sink is, you know, they can get dented, they can get dinged, but, you know, honestly, they're probably as good the day people throw them away as the day they bought them for 125 bucks at Lowe's. So I'm making the measurements of what the inside channel of this sink needs to be, and I'm just writing them on the sink. Now when you make your hole in your countertop for your sink, it's probably going to be about 1/2 inch short every direction. So if your sink is 32 by 22, your hole in the countertop is going to be 31 by 21. That's generally the rule of thumb. You just need enough of a lip that sink is going to sit on it. They actually make these little brackets that hook into the channel that goes around the bottom of a sink. And then they catch the countertop, and you just tighten them up with a screwdriver and it holds it down. Generally what I've always done is I always caulk them down. That way I don't need to fiddle with the hardware or getting underneath there or anything like that. I just put a bead of caulk around the outside edge, and I tape up the top of the countertop so I've got nice sharp lines. Then I'll go ahead and caulk the countertop. Ew, look at that, I gotta remove that. I'll go ahead and caulk the countertop, drop the sink in, and wipe the line all the way around it with my finger, and then pull the tape. And you'll see all that here in just a few minutes. What I'm doing right now is I'm rounding the corners on my pattern, because the channels that hold the sink down, they don't go all the way to the corner, so I don't really need to cut to a 90-degree corner. I can get close to the corner and then cut around. I'm using the skill saw for all the plunge cuts and all the long straight lines. Once all the long straight lines have been cut, then I'll switch over to a jigsaw to make the cuts around the very corner pieces, the radius cuts. Because you can get 90% of this work done with just the skill saw itself. There's no sense in jigsawing all the way around here. It just take you forever. Now on the front of the counter, there's a lip that goes over. So you got to put down some kind of a board to keep your saw straight as you make that front cut. That's what I'm doing here in this picture. About a 3/4 inch lip. I got a piece of 3/4 inch plywood. Works about perfect. From here it's jigsaw time. Now you can go ahead and cut the 2 cuts out of the back of the countertop. And the reason I say you cut them out of the back of the countertop is because the back is flat. You could really work at the back of the countertop where the, where the splash guard is, all that stuff. When you get to the front, you've got that lip to deal with, and that's when you have to flip the countertop over and cut from the top. I'll make these last 2 cuts from the top of the counter. Generally, I try to make all of my cuts from the back except these two. And the reason being is you don't want to chip out the formica on the top of the countertop itself. Cutting from the back, it generally doesn't chip at all. But cutting from the top, you never know. You could catch a piece that's not quite glued down right, and you could pop a chunk out. Very difficult to cut one of these things out without having a little something. I think on this one, there's that little piece right up there by the corner. That was the worst I got. Now here's the space I have to work with. And here are my kitchen cabinet partitions. I call these partitions because they break up the counter space. You know, you're going to have a spot on one end for cabinets and drawers, spot on the other end for cabinets and drawers. Then in the center is going to be the under the sink portion where you put your bleach and your disinfectant and Brillo pads and whatnot. And I'm taking right now, I'm building these things upside down and backwards, in case you're wondering. I take that 90-degree wooden channel and I drive it in with screws, or excuse me, drive it in with nails. And I'll tilt this whole thing down. Oh my goodness, you can see what I'm doing now. Now it actually looks like a set of cabinets. I'll finish nailing all this off. See, the camera doesn't like it. Every time I hit the countertop, it bounces the camera. I've got a little bit of wood I need to remove because that 90 is just a touch too long. You know, nothing's perfect in carpentry, that's for sure. So I hit that with the electric hand planer. Zip my 1x2s with the electric hand planer just to clean up the faces. And as you can see, I'm kind of laying out the area on the top of the counter where the drawers are going to go. There'll be a fake drawer front in the center eventually. But on the far ends, they're actually going to be drawers. When it comes to finished carpentry, you're talking to the wrong guy. I do finished carpentry with the same hammer I drive 20 penny galvies in with. I think that one right there is a 21 ounce Vaughan. I've built half a dozen houses with that Vaughan. Had it on hundreds and hundreds of concrete jobs. Now I've already nailed off that 90-degree box at the bottom. So you saw me there a second ago taking the tape measure and kind of measuring from the end to the center two partitions. I want to make sure they're right when I nail them off up top. A little bit of glue down here on these last two partitions. I got to make sure they're the right distance apart. And of course, they've got to be nailed at 7 feet from the end, just like the bottom. That way everything is good and square and happy. You see a 5-inch gap here. My drawers are going to be about 4 3/4. That'll give me a little bit of space. Time to glue this bottom section up. Basically, I think this is called face framing. I don't know the exact terminologies. I'm a cement finisher after all. So what I'm doing is just gluing everything up, getting it good and covered in glue, and then I will nail it all together. Now the side I want to use actually still has the grading stamp on it, so I had to zip that real quick with the electric hand planer. I'm going to lay down that bottom section, nail her all off. And once I've got it all nailed off, then I'm just going to go ahead and trim off the corners, the end pieces that are hanging off. Because I didn't measure these face boards to fit, I just let them run long and made a 7-inch mark on them. Now that they're all nailed off, I'll just trim off these ends. And nothing fancy, you know, this is a cabin. Let's not get too technical with things. I didn't cut them with a chainsaw, so give me some credit, right? Now that I've flipped this set of cabinets up, you can see that it's actually starting to look like a cabinet, like a real set of cabinets. So now that we have the cabinets flipped over, let's bring in the countertop. We'll set the countertop on top and see what we got. Now let me tell you right now, one of the problems with building a log house and fitting, you know, dimensional stuff to it, straight lines and whatnot, is that the round faces of the logs push everything off to the side. So anywhere that backsplash is touching the log, I'm going to trim into the logs so that it will fit nice and tight up into that space and not have anything that pushes the countertop out away from the wall. I want it to look like it kind of grows into the wall. A little bit of chisel work here, and we'll clean this area up. The backsplash, it's going to need about 4 or 5 inches to set in there because it's you know, there's quite a bit there. On the very end of the cabinet, though, you're just going to have the 3/4 of an inch cabinet itself, and I'm going to make amends for that as well. So it'll slide in from the end and fit into the end wall. You'll see here in just a second. There we go. That is what I'm looking for on the back. 2 days later, I've put in a couple bottoms, just OSB, a couple little trimmers inside. Nothing to see there really, it's just a piece of wood that fits that spot and you put it in. I've also put in a couple 2x2 nailers at the top of these partitions. That'll give me something to glue down the countertop to. And I've also made the cuts into the end. So when I set the countertop in, it will slide right into that groove. Just like this. Check it out. Nice. That's what I wanted. I wanted that countertop to blend into the log. That's really what I'm looking for. Now for a little face framing. Basically what I'm doing is building the front of these countertops, one piece at a time. Fit the piece in, glue it, nail it off, and then move on to the next piece. This is the same lumber. You know, this is actually furring strips. I think between the furring strips I bought, the 3/4 inch plywood that I bought, I probably have maybe $50 into this bottom set of cabinets so far. There's no doors there, but it's going to be solid. It's going to last a long, long time. No particle board here, no fanciness. It's going to be rustic, but the plywood partitions make for a very, very strong set of cabinets. I'm just fitting in my parts and pieces. Once they're glued and nailed, they ain't going nowhere. Now what I generally do is I make my faces wide enough that after everything has been nailed off and everything has been glued, it'll give me enough room to go in behind with a small gusset. I'll take a small gusset, pre-drill it, glue it up, put it right behind that joint, put a screw in each side, and then that's going to be rock solid. After I nail this off, I'll show you what I'm talking about. Just a little gusset like this, little chunk of 1/2 inch plywood, about 1 inch wide, 3 inches long, something that you can't see that's going to sit back in behind there. Glue that sucker up, pre-drill a couple holes, tuck her right back behind the corner like so. A couple screws in it, just screws that are short enough that they will never come out the face of the cabinets. And then that's pretty much it. A little bit of screw work, a little bit of drill work, a couple gussets back there. You don't need to do this. This is overkill. But that is muy solid now. It's not going anywhere. One thing I like to do here is I like to drop a gusset behind the full length of the center cabinet. It's not really a gusset. It's almost like what I would use to put on the front. But it's going to give me something to nail those face 1x2s off to. And it's also going to provide stability to the center of the sink. Now that everything is set, let's caulk down these countertops. What a messy job. Who hired this hippie anyway? That's better. That looks pretty good. Now all I'm doing is just using a plain white adhesive caulk silicone product. And I run a nice fat bead up underneath there. Make sure it gets where it's supposed to go. You know, pack it in there with your finger. Add a little weight to the countertop if you need to get it down. But once that's set, that counter's not going anywhere. But in the event that you needed to remove it, a razor knife would take care of it. You could cut that bond and work that loose. But it's going to be plenty good. Now let's throw in the sink. This is your standard 2-bowl stainless steel sink. And we're just doing the setup right now. Getting our drain pipes fitted. Now these things come a little bit long. That long piece that runs from one side to the other it's always just a touch long. So you may have to trim it, but it's good soft material. You can trim it with pretty much anything. Once you've got it to where it's long enough that it goes into the other one, but not so long that you have to force it into place before you tighten down your clamp, then you're about right. What makes the seal on these units is a round, kind of a half clear plastic washer, and that washer is kind of triangle shaped in its cross section, and it fits tightly into the other piece, and then the screw portion that I'm screwing in right now packs that washer into the joint. Let me show you a little better right here. There's that washer. It's kind of a plasticky rubber, and then that clamp forces that washer into the joint. Make sure you get it good and snug. Now that this sink is all ready to go, I've test fitted, putting it in the hole. I want to make sure that there's no debris underneath of it, no leaves, no junk. Because I mean, it's a used sink, right? Now that I've got it where I want it, and I know that everything's good, I'm going to put down my tape. I go about 1/4 inch outside the sink on every direction. This is the caulk that you're actually going to see. When I caulk this thing, there's going to be about 1/4 inch of caulk that sticks out along the edges. And on black, I really like to use clear, because clear is kind of invisible, and when you do see it, it doesn't bother you. It doesn't look stupid. White caulk would probably look a little gaudy on this, but you know, to each his own, right? Once again, on the corners, I'll kind of cut the corner with a piece of tape, because the edge of that tape is going to be the finished edge of my caulk. Clear. Make sure it's clear. Now I cut off the end. Take a log screw and break the seal inside the cylinder. Remove the sink. Lay a nice fat bead of caulk. Now there's no reason to be chintzy here, because this is going to hold the sink down in place. Just so put a big fat bead on there. That fat bead is going to do two things. It's going to hold the sink down, and what squashes out the side, it's actually going to be your finished edge. Run your finger along the edge. Make a nice concaved caulk line. It's going to look good. Here, I'll show you here in just a second. Once that's all nice and smoothed in, so it's got a nice, clean, crisp caulk line, I'm going to pull that tape off. Wait for it. Beautiful. That caulk line is not only functional and structural, it's also aesthetic. You don't really see it, and when you do see it, it's got a good crisp line. Now, take whatever you have that's too much, you know, that's up on top of the sink, and make sure you get that cleaned off. No sense in leaving a sloppy job. You can get it off later, but it's going to be a razor knife job at that point. Nice corner, nice corner. Good crisp lines.
Now that all of this is done, there's nothing left to do but get my hands washed up and just walk away. This countertop is going to bond to the cabinets below it. The sink bowl is going to bond to the countertop. All that silicone is going to it's going to take the place of construction adhesive and clamps and screws and everything else. It's a great way to do it because it's a good solid bond, and if you ever need to take it apart, it's not the end of the world. Gotta get all this silicone off my fingers. So that's where we're at with the counters. I put the sink in. I hooked up the drain underneath the sink. I haven't hooked up the exit pipe that actually is going to turn and gray water out to daylight underneath the house. And I'm not gonna. You'll probably know before I post this, but Brooke and the kids flew down to Michigan. It's time for the kids to go back to school. They had a terrible storm, a big one. And a big beech tree fell and hit our house in Michigan. Not only that, but it messed the barn up so bad that 2 days later the barn fell down. And you'll probably be able to see that because Brooke actually got it on camera. It was just making all kinds of noise all day long, and it looked pretty sickly. and then it just glaciered into the front yard. So for the last 24 hours I've been packing this place up. Daisy and I are almost ready to go. I just got to sweep the floor and take out the garbage, and I'm going to hang it up. I've got a barn to tear down at least. Maybe a barn to rebuild, which would be cool. We'll have to just see. Also, I got to fix the roof and cut up the beech tree. And I need to tear the chicken coop down. The house was bad enough. The house was weighing on my mind. Like, should I stay up here and keep working and save up a bit of money and pay somebody to fix the roof? Or should I just get the car and go fix the roof myself? But when the barn came down, it kind of made my mind up for me. So thank you guys for watching Bush Radical. Thanks for hanging out with me through this countertop project. We'll do the cabinet doors and plumb in the line to the outside next spring. Thank you so much for watching Bush Radical. My name's Dave Whipple, and be radical, eh? See you soon.